of the Yamhill Leadership Roundtable. Again, thanks to McMinnville Community Media for live streaming and filming this later, and to Mayor Cape's Hand for sharing with us. The folks we have on the line today with us are Commissioner Rick Olson, Yamhill County. We've got Gioia Goodrum, the McMinnville Chamber of Commerce. We have Mayor Cooley from Sheridan. We've got Mayor Cape from Amity. We've got Scott Cooper from McMinnville Economic Development Partnership. We've got Abisha Stone from SEDCOR. We've got Representative David Gomberg from all over the coast and some parts inland. We have Shannon Buckmaster from the Chehalem Valley Chamber of Commerce. We have Stacey Jochimsen from Senator Jeff Merkley's office. It's like I haven't said this before. We have, I accidentally put Philip Higgins in here, but he may want to ask some questions. And we have Commissioner Mary Starrett, and I got a couple more people that I need to promote. So I would love to hear first off from Representative Gomberg. If you could talk a little bit about how the e-board, what happened at the e-board on Friday, and also what would you like to tell people from Yamhill County? Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, you had your last meeting on Friday, and I could not join you because I was participating in the e-board, although you had gotten us some questions in advance, and I appreciate that very much. We were able to get you at least some answers to the questions you had. But let's talk about the e-board. The emergency board is a subgroup of the legislature, which is empowered to meet when we are not in session and to allocate monies from a designated fund. We were asked to come together on Friday afternoon to deal with a $1.39 billion allocation from the federal government through the CARES Act. $1.39 billion. That's a lot of money. To put that in context, I mean, you've heard a lot of conversation about the corporate activity tax, which was designed to deal with education needs. And we debated that for months, and it's going to generate less money than this $1.39 billion is that we allocated in less time than it usually takes me to cut my lawn. So the money was divided up into 3 pots. Originally, there were 4 pots. The 4th pot was something called new programs. And when you finally drill down to the details, new programs were defined as projects that are currently in the development stage for $300 million. And several of us, myself certainly included, were very uncomfortable with the idea of approving $300 million when we didn't know what we were approving them for, a plan to have a plan. So that money was pulled back, and instead we dealt with 3 buckets of cash. One of them was to reimburse the state for expenses they have incurred in the COVID challenge. The second pot, about $415 million, was allocated to cities, counties, and tribes, local governments and tribes, to reimburse them again for expenses that they have incurred. And then the final portion, about $515 million, is going to go into a reserve account. Well, let me talk first of all about the local government and tribes dollars, because the proposal was that those monies would be used primarily to reimburse health expenses that have been incurred. Now, understand that while the state has gotten this allocation of about $1.4 billion, money has been sent separately to the city of Portland, to Washington County, and to Multnomah County. And so the question that I raised is, will we at the state level be spending money everywhere else differently than we were allowed to spend it in Portland? And I say Portland, meaning also Multnomah and Washington counties. And because we were going to focus on healthcare expenses, and my question was, will the metropolitan area also focus on healthcare expenses? They had received a letter from the governor, from the president of the Senate, from the Speaker of the House, asking them to do just that, focus on healthcare expenses. And the city of Portland wrote back, and we actually received their letter while we were having the e-board meeting, saying, we're going to spend our money on anything that the federal government allows us to. So we have a different set of circumstances in the Portland area than we do everywhere else, including Clackamas County, I might add. So that is one of the discussions that is underway right now, is how do we spend these dollars, and is it being spent differently in the rest of Oregon than it is in Washington, Multnomah, and Portland. The other thing I wanted to talk about is that third bucket of money called reserves. And we've got $515 million in reserves now. That's a lot of money. And I've asked the question, who's going to decide how that money is spent, and who's going to provide oversight? Who's going to review the allocation decisions? And the answer I got back is that that will be reviewed either by the emergency board or by the legislature. Understand this money has to be spent before the end of the year. So that's a $515 million that we need to get moving on very quickly. I have since asked the House leadership, if we've got proposals, if we've got suggestions, if we've got ideas on how to spend the money, who do we give those ideas to? And the answer was to provide them to the office of the Speaker of the House, or I suppose alternatively, although it wasn't said this way, that it could go to the President of the Senate as well. So that's how those monies are being allocated. It's a huge amount of money, and we need to make sure we do it well, we do it fairly, and we use it in a way that is going to benefit our communities. So that's how I spent my Friday afternoon. The final thing I'll share with you is we continue to work on the issue of making sure unemployment claims dollars get to people who qualify for those dollars. The employment division is now increased from 100 people to nearly 700 people that are working on those claims. But and they are at long last processing more claims a week than they are receiving a week. But we still have thousands and thousands of Oregonians that don't have that money, that have been waiting 4, 5, 6 weeks to get it. That particularly includes the owners of small businesses that are newly qualified under changing federal rules, most of whom haven't seen that money yet. And so it's a huge problem for the people who are waiting for the money. The other issue I'll share very briefly with you, and I see Senator Roblin has just joined us, but that is that there was a court case challenging the authority of the governor to manage this emergency as long as she has. The judge in Baker County decided that the governor did not have the authority to extend an emergency declaration and executive orders more than 28 days. But the Supreme Court of the state of Oregon has decided to hear this case. So they have put a stay on the Baker County decision, which is just what it sounds like. Sit, stay. Don't go anywhere, don't do anything until the Supreme Court gets an opportunity to review this local court decision. So that question remains up in the air. Senator, I touched on the e-board a little bit. I don't know how much of what I shared you heard, but I certainly defer to you to add anything to the conversation.
Thanks, David. I didn't get to hear all of it. I was on a call with the realtors across the state. We had a Zoom meeting, and it was going on, and it went a little longer than I had anticipated. I think what you hit on was the big stuff. We had an e-board meeting, which really basically said, here's some money you can spend on how you have actually spent money on the health part of the health crisis. In having conversation with people, I have said every county, even if you haven't had very many cases, has spent a lot of money on the health. So think about what their health departments have told them they needed to do to take care of the situation. In counties like Tillamook, they had to go and move barriers to keep them off the beaches and keep them out of parks. That was a requirement from the health department because they didn't want people using those facilities. I think that qualifies for a health-related issue. So go back and look at what you have encouraged your counties to do because of the health emergency that exists and what you've done in response to that. It doesn't mean taking care of people in the hospital. It means what have you done as a local government to spend money to meet the needs of your health department. So I would say look that over and send that money in and request your money. So make sure that everybody gets what they can out of this resource that we have for the health part. And I agree with Representative Gomberg that we've got this other $500 million that we've got to figure out how economically can we help people and do things. I know that there's a group of Democrats and Republican House members that have been working on that for a while, coming up with ideas. And as we get ready to start thinking about another special session, which may or may not happen, each of our committees are starting to have meetings. I have a June 2nd meeting with my mental health committee, but others are meeting to try to have these conversations now, which we've always done in the interim, to get ready for the next session and possibly a special session. So I guess with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions, and thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today.
Thank you for joining us, Senator and Representative. Questions?
Well, here's the catch, everybody. If we spend this money and the federal government decides that we did not spend it based on the criteria that they have detailed, then guess what? We have to give it back. So we need to make sure that as we allocate these dollars that we follow the federal guidelines in doing so. But we also want to make sure that we actually spend it rather than losing it at the end of the year if we don't spend it.
And also, just so you know, personally liable the governor is for this money. That's one of the reasons she's been careful about it and making sure that there are restrictions when counties ask for the money, that they know that it's being spent the right way. Just like up in Multnomah, Washington, and Portland, those head executives are personally responsible for the money they're getting from the federal government, not just from the agency, but themselves. So it's a scary thing when you're talking about $1.3 billion. A lot of us don't have that in our banking accounts.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good caution for all of us, right? Yeah. Any further follow-up questions to the e-board specifically? Senator and Representative, I believe that we will be, as commissioners, discussing the CARES Act funding on Thursday. So we do have two questions. Oh, never mind. Sorry, these are not specifically for you. See, you're getting off the hook. You didn't get the easy questions this time, but maybe some hard questions by the time we're done. Okay, what I'd love to do, let's see, there are some questions. One of them is from Abisha. What are you hearing from jurisdictions that have opened in regards to visitors and protecting staff at businesses? And then I think there was another one in there, but Representative and Senator, what about at the coast?
It's been raining.
It has been raining, but we've been seeing more out of county, out of state license plates for driving through our places now, because there are more places open on the coast. And even though our county parks have reservation only and they can reserve just to a county group, in Coos County, they will take Josephine, Jackson, Douglas, and Curry and make reservations. So they're starting to show up, and the access to the dunes is now being opened, and BLM is looking at doing that, as well as does the one place they had at Riley Ranch, which is in Coos County, and one place in Douglas County. So that we're starting to see a little bit more of that. Lane County never closed their hotels and stuff, so I don't think they've seen as much. But you know, my wife was saying it was shocking when she went out the other day. About 8 or 9 cars from out of state were driving through Coos Bay heading towards the beach. So we think we're getting a few more people. So far, it hasn't been overwhelming, and the parks have not been full to this point. So our hope is that we don't get overwhelmed by it. Our hospital's taking this very seriously, and I think our health department is nervous. Our county commissioners are apprehensive, but recognizing they have to get it going, and we would hope that it would go smoothly and not have increased cases. So I guess that's one of the reasons they went to 21 days instead of 14, because it takes about 14 for it to show up. And so you want to make sure that you don't start having rising levels of COVID. But to this point, the businesses that are opening up, my wife got a hair appointment scheduled in a week. So the scheduling is happening, and things are happening that I think people are excited about. So we'll have to wait and see.
Well, I'll remind you that lodging is largely still closed along the coast, although it's going to be opening up relatively soon. So our restaurants are open, but our hotels, our vacation rentals, campgrounds are not. And candidly, my sense is that that people are falling into one of two categories. They either want to open up, get back to work, they're worried about the economy, or they want to shut down, stay closed, and keep people away because they're worried about increasing infection rates. We need to find the means to bring all of our communities together and make sure that we're not dividing up into groups that are in opposition to each other. I mean, I'll give you an example. The senator spoke about out-of-state license plates, and I hear about that every day. Newport, which is in our district, is a Coast Guard town. Those people stationed here don't have Oregon license plates. I would hate to think that somebody is reacting negatively to one of our men and women in uniform because they are stationed here. So we're seeing those kinds of issues popping up, but as we begin to reopen. And again, I just think it's very important that we remind our communities that we're all in this together, and we need to treat each other with respect as we move to the next step in this process.
Yeah, we'll just tell them to go get their wine from the vine. Don't get it in the restaurant on the beach. You know, we'll send them all back over there to Yamhill.
Right. Well, twice this week I was on TV saying, yeah, you can come here, but just be careful, which is apparently not what other county commissioners in metro surrounding counties said. Apparently they said, don't come here. We should have gotten together and talked about this beforehand. But I think that Abisha's question is actually one that I would love to have kind of a 30-second, 20-second version from the people who are arrayed here, which is what are you hearing about reopening in regards to visitors and protecting staff at businesses? And feel free to unmute yourself, and then I'll call on you. How about that? And then we'll go to how about Commissioner Olson? What have you heard from? Oh, Shannon Buckmaster.
Okay, excellent. So I heard a lot over the weekend. My cell phone was very, very busy. And of course, you know, when you have somebody who's contacting you Saturday night at 9 p.m., they're very passionate about what they're experiencing. So I did have a lot of businesses reached out, overwhelmed by people traveling from our visiting counties. They're really scared. They want their paychecks back, they want the customers back, but they want their local customers back. And in the case of one hairdresser, she opened her shop Friday morning. She received over 30 people from outside of our area, Washington County, Marion County, and even a couple in Multnomah County, who were asking for walk-in appointments on for haircuts. And she even had another hairdresser from Lake Oswego offer her a very large sum of money to rent a chair month to month to be able to bring his clientele from Lake Oswego to Newburgh in order to operate out of her shop. So she's first of all scared of all the contact. She doesn't want to become a hotbed of, you know, contact tracing back to her establishment. It was disruptive to her business. She wasn't able to serve the customers that she was trying to bring back in a timely manner. And she was actually really thoughtful. She had prepared her business so that she gave scheduling priority to the customers she knew either had autoimmune disorders, underlying medical conditions, people who were essential care workers, because she knows the sooner she gets them in, the less likely anybody will be exposed to anything in her shop. So she was super safe. But I heard from several hairdressers in personal care appointments. That was one anecdote, several more. Restaurants were having a hard time with crowd control because people were not following the social distancing practices. And so there was a lot of fear that, you know, if somebody from OSHA walked in right now, they were doing the best they could to conduct business safely, but people were not cooperating. A lot of customers were not wearing masks. People were on the street not wearing masks. It looked like it was First Friday in downtown Newburgh on Friday evening after everything opened up. So I think some businesses, I had heard from others who frankly weren't going to open this weekend because they were afraid of the travel influx from other communities. And Newburgh, especially being on the east part of the county, we have Sherwood at the top of the hill. We're close to Hillsborough. We're close to Beaverton. We're close to Salem. We have all of these roads, these highways that dump into Newburgh. You couldn't get a pedicure actually because of all of the locals coming, or the non-locals in town at these shops. So it's a double-edged sword. We want the economic recovery, but now we're concerned that in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, as these, as we start to see more of the effects of what we could have experienced as a community, we're scared that we're going to have to close again. So some businesses are scaling back. Like I said, some chose not to reopen. And this is all within this really difficult balance of, one restaurant told me they actually made more money on Friday night than they had any Friday night the previous year, including celebration of holidays like St. Patrick's Day and Cinco de Mayo last year. So there you have it. It was a busy weekend.
Yeah, thank you very much for that update, Shannon. That sobering update, I might add. And along those lines, I'd love to hear from Gioia or from Scott Cooper about the situation in McMinnville, if you could, kind of an update on that way. Businesses and visitors.
Yeah, I'll let Gioia. Dealing with largely the manufacturing sector, it's a little bit of a different world, and I don't want to speak to the chamber members as a whole or downtown as a whole. So I'll defer to Gioia.
Gioia might not be right here with us, so. But Commissioner Olson and Commissioner Starrett, did you hear? What have you heard or seen? And then I'll go to Abisha. Commissioner Olson, you need to unmute yourself, please. Okay, how about we go with Abisha then, because I haven't heard from either one. And you were going to say something.
Yeah, while Commissioner Olson is unmuting. So I have, just as Scott does, I deal mainly with the manufacturing community and have a focus in the food manufacturing realm. So we have seen, just recently, for example, one of our large food manufacturing partners was fined for lack of ability to maintain distancing on the production floor. And this is an issue that I won't say is being expressed in all of our manufacturing facilities, but the pressure of trying to maintain throughputs at volumes to be able to be profitable while also either having to extend the lines or slow production lines down to keep people safe and to be able to distance them is creating a lot of long-term pressure for these businesses. So businesses most certainly did everything they could immediately from the folks that we're working with and what we were hearing to protect their employees. OMAP was a great partner in working with businesses to put together strategies for social distancing on production lines, and I think they were very effective in supporting those businesses. As we look at this as a long-term solution, there is a lot more concern about how they're going to do that ongoing. A short-term loss of revenue is a lot easier to accept than the potential long-term loss of revenue, and or to find the source of funding that's needed to invest in extending production lines or new equipment or different processes. So this is a continued concern. How is this going to be managed? And we have seen cases of COVID-19 pop up in some of our manufacturing business partners' facilities. I think that everybody's done a great job from what I've heard of handling that and working with contact tracers, communicating with their staff, making sure that folks are getting tested properly. And again, this is now the reality of how do we implement all of these requirements that are being put on us, and how do we access what we need in order to do that, such as thermal imaging to take people's temperatures and those sorts of things. So in the manufacturing realm, these are the concerns. These are definitely the needs, and there's a fear of managing this long term. As I repeat myself, I apologize.
Thank you, Abisha. Commissioner Olson, I'm going to unmute you because I just realized I can do that. And then I'm going to go to Commissioner Starrett and unmute her after you. Okay, thank you, Commissioner Olson. You're on.
Can you hear me all right, Casey and everybody? It may be a little bit loud, but This afternoon, I decided after my meeting with the DA's office, I would come down and check out another one of our local establishments downtown. I can tell you after this weekend and today what I've seen, the establishment I'm in right now is doing a great job with social distancing. It's cut their available seating by about half, but it's going good. It's going good. The only complaint they've had is there's a line, of course, outside waiting to get in, but they can seat now about 22 out of their 50 people that they can seat. I did check in with some other restaurants this weekend, went in and just checked them out, and everybody seems to be doing all the social distancing. Again, the concern I'm hearing is the concern of people coming from Polk County, Marion County, and Washington County into Yamhill County. But I think that's something we have to put up with, and if everything goes well, I think we'll be just fine.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Olson. I'm going to mute you again since it's loud behind you, but I appreciate that. And I'm going to unmute Commissioner Starrett. All right, you can talk, or we can hear you now.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
You're like mission control. Thank you, Commissioner. Just briefly, yeah, I see a lot of confusion because while we can in Yamhill County open a lot of establishments, some of them have chosen not to open. So people are going out thinking that, you know, certainly everything's going to be open, and it's not. So there's that. Also, a couple of things. We get emails all the time from people who are asking specific questions about their particular business. And sometimes these are so specific that we have to really kind of run them up to Jody Christensen to try to get some clarification. One of them was, and you might have gotten this email too as well, Commissioner, and that was the somebody from the AA Fellowship was asking about, well, our churches are where we hold all our meetings, and we haven't been able to do that, and it's really had an impact on the recovery community. So I said, well, my understanding is, and I remember, I think you might have been on this call too, Commissioner Cooley, where they talked about various, in a church, various groups of congregations could meet in groups of 25 if they were in separate rooms. And then apparently Jody checked on that and said, no, that isn't what you could do. But I do remember them saying that was okay, if I remember correctly. Do you remember that as well?
Yeah, that was the chief of staff who said that very, very clearly.
Okay, so I said to this person who said, well, could we have groups of 25, maybe a group outside, a group inside? And then the response I got after two clarifications from Jody was, no, that's not acceptable. So I really feel like sometimes we're kind of, I don't know, we're in the position of passing along information that's being made up on the fly, and it's very frustrating. I had another very large business that has office staff in McMinnville say, well, what does that mean exactly? Who can telecommute and who can't? And so really what I'm doing just to play it safe is running everything by Jody just so I actually have it in writing from the governor's office and saying this is what we're being told. And then we have to go with that at this point. And people are really confused about the Baker County decision, and then just the quick turnaround with the stay and what that means and what that doesn't mean. And so, you know, it's just a confusing time, but I think really just trying to pass along as much information as we can and try to make it as accurate as possible.
Absolutely, Commissioner. Thank you. Yes.
And one more thing.
Oh, yes, please.
Real quick. Oh, just about, I believe it was Senator Roblin who was talking about that, the CRF, the Coronavirus Relief Fund. And we did get, Commissioner Pope and I and a couple other commissioners were saying to AOC, how come we're not doing this as an organization or Association of Oregon Counties, really asking for some specifics on that, on those funds, because, you know, we're not Multnomah County and we're not Washington County. So how can we have a little more equity in the distribution of that money? So hopefully, since this letter did go out to the governor's office, the speaker, on all our legislators, and sort of as AOC, we might actually see some distribution to local governments that are closer to the federal guidelines. And that's all. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Commissioner Starrett. And I believe that Shannon Buckmaster has a follow-up on the church question.
Commissioner Starrett, thank you for raising that. And there is a lot of confusing information that's going out, especially with a large group of 25. I think we were able to clarify, at least on this call, that it's a yes and no situation. No, you may not have multiple groups of, large groups of 25. Unless they are completely socially isolated, which means that they have separate access to the building. They don't use the same doorway. They don't use the same hallways. They don't use the same bathrooms or any other common shared areas. So it's the equivalent of having two separate buildings, really, is what you would create the boundary there. So that might be some of the confusion. But what might be helpful, I believe it was early last week, the governor's office hosted an online video session with a specific plan addressing concerns in faith centers. And they spent a lot of time talking about what it meant to manage the large group of 25 concept, but even the smaller self-selecting social distancing groups of up to 10 within those large groups of 25. And the call was about an hour. I know it was recorded and there was a slideshow presentation. So that may be a helpful resource just to review or to share with members of the faith community. And that was directly from the governor's office as well. And so, you know, as Jody is managing all of these requests and several of our regional solutions teams are putting information out there, that may be a good reference point.
And we were on that call, Shannon, and it was pretty confusing.
It was, but it did have the PowerPoint that had the bullet point restrictions and allowances on that. So that might be a good place to start.
Great. Thank you very much. And I do share Commissioner Starrett's both frustration and desire to have accurate information without interpreting a word that's in a guidance. So that's definitely been challenging and frustrating to members of the business community as well. Okay, thank you. I want to go, we just had Dave Ruckless join us from the McMinnville Downtown Association, and we were just answering the question, I want to get this right, which is, I can't find it. What have you been hearing from businesses in regards to both visitors and protecting staff at businesses, Dave? And welcome.
Thank you.
Just to put you on the hot spot right away.
Yeah. So I've been around downtown all through the weekend and so forth. And I think if you guys have as well, you've seen it's kind of a mixed bag down there. We talked about that on the Main Street executive meeting this morning about what it's looking like in all cities across the state, and it's pretty consistent. You've got half the people that are moving forward with their reopening, and half the people are kind of waiting to see what happens. And so I think that in particular, those that are waiting, they're trying in part to figure out how it is they're going to do business and do it safely within their environment. This has been encouraged for a long time, but I think now that it finally has happened, most people are getting on it and trying to figure those kinds of things out. There's no set plan, right? Because every floor plan, in particular downtown, is completely different. So it's a matter of the individual business owner doing due diligence and then following the guidelines and then mapping it out in their own environment. I noticed that some people are doing it in a very professional manner, and I've seen other people do it in a somewhat haphazard manner. So because there's no actual group out there that is, fining people for maybe not doing what they're supposed to be doing and so forth, you're really leaving it up to everybody to do it on their own. And obviously you can make recommendations and so forth. But I think the biggest thing, what we tell our people, is that the safer you look, the more likely it is you're going to attract a customer to do business with you. If you go by your business and it looks like a place that isn't safe, they're likely to keep walking. And so that's kind of where we are on the safety issue right now downtown.
Great, thank you very much, Dave, and welcome. Gioia was not available earlier to answer the question about what you've seen from businesses and visitors in regards to phase one. And if you could briefly share your thoughts as well, I'd appreciate that.
Sure. So our office is still not open. We're in the process of getting it open so we can get visitors in. We've had some certainly interest in people coming to our community, not huge amounts, but definitely some interest in people. I had a conversation with a member yesterday that owns a salon, and it's cost her $2,000 just to open her doors. So not having any income for 2 months, and now $2,000 to buy PPE and plexiglass, and you know, if you're doing nails, then you have to have some kind of barrier between you and that person. The masks and the gloves and everything else. So there's a lot that goes into that. In general, my sense from businesses is, they are so happy to be open again. The people that are in town, we had to take our cat to the vet on Saturday, and our vet's office staff were overjoyed that they got to go out on Friday night because they hadn't been able to do that. They visit with each other a lot. So I think in general, people are really excited when I talk to them. There are folks that are happy that our numbers are really low with cases and you know, there was a death I think yesterday, but there hasn't been any deaths today or the day before. I don't remember all the statistics. So you know, things are looking brighter. I think people are excited and they're happy. So, you know, that's kind of where we are right now. That's what I'm seeing. I did hear that there was one business in town that is basically going to close their doors because they can't come back. And which makes me really, really sad. We hate to lose any businesses in our community. It is a restaurant. And so, and I honestly, I heard that from a third party, so I have not confirmed that with the owner. But it makes me sad to hear that, you know, that might happen. So I don't know where they are. Something has changed since that moment. So I don't know if you have any other questions.
Other questions for Gioia?
So I have a quick question to see as well, and I'd love to hear weigh in on this, and then also for our elected officials on this call to just be aware as well too. We did also have some complaints here in the Newburgh area that some businesses that were not included in phase one opened up for phase one anyway. And most often these were businesses that were not given any sort of clear guidance. A lot of offices or office spaces, we also are not opening our office. I did hear very clearly that we were asked by Governor Brown to continue remotely working if at all possible. But then you also have some jealousy, right? So we're part of the same industry. Why did they open this weekend and we didn't, following the rules? Did you hear that as well, Gioia? Did you see some people jumping the gun?
I actually did. I had a business tell me that they called the SBA and the SBA said they could go back to work. I was like, why is the SBA telling you can go back to work? No, I don't think so. You're an office, and clearly the regs, you know, the requirements of this, the restrictions say offices, you can continue to work. And I understand why the SBA said that, because they want you paying people to not be there, right? So I think that's where the confusion came in. You know, we, you know, I said, I think that's incorrect. I think you know, the restrictions say you have to wait at least till phase 2. So you know, yeah, I think people are confused.
So this is different. I'm sorry, Joe, I just want to clarify for the viewing public. Would this be businesses that are encouraged to telework under the EO 2012, but that if they cannot telework, that they identify somebody to develop a plan to maintain social distance, and then they can work? Yeah, okay.
Correct, yeah. Yeah, and it's important that you have those things in place. We're actually in the process of putting together a 33-page document. I know nobody wants to read 33 pages of how to open your business, but we will be providing that to our members as soon as I can get through the 33 pages myself and make sure it's all edited properly.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Gioia. And question from Representative Gomberg to the business community here is, are you hearing from businesses concerned that they can't get their employees back?
I can say certainly yes. I received several calls this weekend, and I'm still getting calls throughout the week that even with the impending threat that if they refuse to return to work, people are willing to take that risk, especially with the federal stimulus addition of $600 per week. There are so many businesses, and it's not even the businesses that we think. Like, there's even mid-level office management who is now making more money with unemployment insurance than they would be with a regular paycheck. And it's very difficult to document, even with the two-step written letter of employment offer with the written rejection of employment offer. People aren't going to do that. They're not going to set themselves up to fail. And there are a lot of people with very valid medical concerns as well. So they're still not able to return to work, but those employers still need them to return to work, regardless if it's childcare, if they have underlying health conditions, caring for somebody. There's a tremendous mismatch right now. And especially in the larger employers and the manufacturers and other labor dependent forces, they're really struggling, and it's actually becoming a restriction from our businesses that they aren't able to open because they don't have a workforce.
Yeah, thank you. I'm hearing that same thing as well, a lot from the childcare industry and also from the manufacturing floor, especially line workers. And as Shannon mentioned, some of those voiced concerns are very valid. And I'm also hearing some of the employers suggest that there are instances of folks not wanting to come back and sharing openly that it's because they're making more money on unemployment. And I'm certain there's a sense of security in being home if there's a fear for exposure to coronavirus as well. And as Shannon and Gioia continue to bring up on these calls, there's those secondary impacts of requirements on these businesses to bring employees back for the value of their PPP, forgivable loan programming, but also for statewide tax incentive sort of programs such as Enterprise Zone. So we're being contacted by our manufacturing partners who, again, have had to decrease production to about 30% on average is what I'm hearing, to be able to space out their lines and maintain employee distancing, who now are having trouble getting their employees back and are now concerned about not being eligible for some of these state incentive programs. So there's multiple concerns associated with this. And as we all know, reopening and being back to business as usual is the first and foremost. That's the primary concern, but there are other things we should all be remembering as well that are impacting these businesses in regards to employees.
And to piggyback on that, not only are the employees worried about going back to work, but the business owners, some of them don't want to go back, but because they can open, they lost all eligibility to stay on unemployment because, some folks are, either high risk or they've got family members that are high risk. So that, compounds the confusion and, the concern that they have too. It's a difficult decision to make, but if you become ineligible for unemployment because you own a business, then you have to go back. So
there's also a very real concern that we're getting from our businesses too. We understand that phase one is conditional that we don't overwhelm our healthcare system, our public health and safety, conditional on the fact that we don't have a substantial spike in coronavirus cases. And so we do have businesses who are sitting back and won't bring back employees because it's actually more expensive for them to bring back a workforce that they will have to lay back off than it is to wait patiently. So it's almost like they're sitting back and saying, well, we'll watch everybody else give this a try. We're not willing to lose more money in the process. So until we know for sure it's safe to bring people back, let them collect unemployment. So I have heard that from businesses as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And one last thing, there's a lot of concern about the fact that I can't bring all of my staff back because I'm only at 50%. Excuse me. And so then, thank you. And then what happens? And I'm hoping that Al and Stacey can fill us in on where we are with the PPP program and what the House voted on Friday and how it's going through with the Senate right now. Thank you.
Excellent segue, Gioia, because I just said Al and then Stacey, would you like to join or do updates next? And it looks like Al, Stacey has unmuted herself first.
Okay, I will, so, right, the House passed the HEROES Act, but we are hearing that Senator McConnell is in no rush to have the Senate take a look at this. And I know that's really concerning, and we're pretty concerned as well. He's talking about June now, waiting until we can take it up. We don't have, Senate Democrats are begging him to, and trying to negotiate to get this on the floor earlier, and it doesn't look like it's going to happen. So we'll continue to, apply some political pressure and try to get this looked at ahead before June. But we're, he controls the calendar 100%, so we don't have the option of putting it up on the floor without him. And then I guess just to speak to the PPP program as it is right now, there's still about $100 billion in the PPP program. I know a lot of businesses are weary to use it and worried about what forgiveness is going to look like. We had a conversation with the business in Yamhill County earlier about the PPP forgiveness application, and there's some vague wording in there about, or I guess it could have the appearance of being vague. There's concerns that if you used the EIDL grant that you would be disqualified from the PPP fund, PPP forgiveness, and that's not the case. You just can't use the EIDL grant for the same expenses that you use the PPP funds for. So it does not disqualify you from forgiveness from the PPP. I still haven't heard anything from SBA regarding whether EIDL will open back up to non-ag. We've asked and we just aren't getting a response. And then I guess I would also say Senator Merkley is having a live discussion of a Rebuilding Main Street Act today on Twitter with Senator Van Hollen from Maryland. They're introducing this bill to try to expand the existing work share program, like the one that Oregon uses. We'd like to expand that nationwide. And that'll be at 2:15 p.m. on the senator's Twitter account or Facebook, and you don't have to have accounts to view it. And then I will let Al speak to the House bill and kind of what was in there. And we look forward to getting to support it. Why he doesn't want to discuss the HEROES Act until June, I think, I don't know. I mean, we're not getting any information. I don't think that he necessarily wants to put all that money back out. And he has a lot of judicial nominations he wants to get on the floor. He's just very hesitant to infuse more money into this. So if we don't debate it, we don't have to talk about it, and no one has to take a stance on it, I think is the situation. Gioia?
Question.
Yeah.
So, but doesn't the HEROES Act also include expanding the, changing the date of when payments for SBA and PPP loans are due? I mean, that's my greatest concern. Yeah. Is how our small businesses are going to be able to do this, and that's why we need to light a fire and get something done, because there are lots of businesses that are going to go,
yeah,
I'm toast right now. So,
and we've, and we know that this is not just an issue in states with Democratic senators. It's an issue in every single state. And so we are, encouraging folks to use your networks and have people, talk to their Republican senators, and we need Mitch McConnell to let us talk about it. That's the option. So we encourage you to use your networks, get the word out to them, because they need it too.
Great, thank you. And Al, you update or follow on, and then I want to make sure that Shannon Buckmaster has a question for you too. So
for me or for Stacey? Either, both. We'll see.
Is that the C6 question? So that is, so that's something that we're pushing for in the Senate version, or we would like to see, but I'll let Al speak to whether that was in the House version. Do you know if that was in the House?
It was in the House version, yes. It would open up PPP to all 501c organizations.
And Senator Merkley does support that if we can get it to the Senate. At this point, I would have no difficulty as a local employer maintaining my staff under PPP conditions without even the need for an extension. I'm still working with full capacity staff, paying them their full wages. I have since the onset of this, and I have no access to emergency funding. So knowing that there are billions of dollars looking for homes, I'd love to pay my people with that money.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Shannon. So I'll go over, I think Stacey did a great job of summing up kind of where it stands moving forward, but we will celebrate that on Friday, the House did pass the HEROES Act, which does provide quite a bit of relief to state and local governments, families, businesses, healthcare providers. And we are happy about that. We're going to celebrate it, but it is not past legislation. It still needs to pass the Senate. So I want to be very clear about that. But I will go over sort of the big points, the big $1 billion funds that it includes, and then I can send up a one-pager that has it if that would be helpful for everyone, so you can see it. I'll do that afterwards. But it includes $950 billion for state and local governments to respond to replace lost revenue, $200 billion in premium pay for essential workers to recognize their role in sustaining our communities. So just to clarify, premium pay is now what Congress is calling hazard pay. They've switched the language to premium pay. $175 billion in new supports to assist renters and homeowners. And I believe, though I need to look into it a little bit closer, I believe that is both for renters and those property owners as well. $90 billion for state and fiscal stabilization fund that can be used to provide emergency support to students, including Dreamers. $85 million in funding for the Older American Acts programs, $2.5 billion for adult education, youth training, dislocated worker grants, migrant and seasonal farm worker programs, and public health worker recruitment and training, which is it's authorized in the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. And then $1.5 billion in supplemental funding for the LIHEAP program, which is Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program. And $1.5 billion for direct assistance with water and wastewater utilities. I also want to say that one of the Congresswoman's main priorities in this bill is invest a big significant targeted investment in childcare. And there is $7 billion included in this bill, which she is very grateful for, and also is very aware that is not enough to lift up our childcare system. So she's going to continue to fight for $50 billion, which I know I know that our senators also are pushing for that as well. So we know that our economy can't really go back to work until we have a childcare system that is there for their children and families. So that's my big overview, and I will send out a one-pager. I will do my best to answer questions on that, but anything I can't answer, I will send up the chain and get back to you as soon as possible. Oh, I also want to take this opportunity to say that the Congresswoman will be on this call next Tuesday. So I want you all to be thinking about questions for her. And if you know right out the gate what you're going to ask, send them to me so I can prepare her best for those questions, and we can make sure that we get everything we can answered. And that'll be Tuesday the 26th, if I remember how time works. Is that right? Okay.
That is how time works. There's this 24-hour cycle that matter. Yeah. Yes. I also wanted to invite Jules from Unidos and Counselor from Newburgh to ask any questions if she has an opportunity. She joined us just a few minutes late, so I forgot to introduce her. Jules, do you have any questions for Al or Stacey?
No, I don't have any questions, but I guess the only thing I would like to add would be that last week I met with Mayor Rick and the city manager, and we talked to a couple of community members to see how they were doing, and one of their concerns was their employers not having enough PPE. So just being aware, because a lot of these folks are in jobs that are called essential. So doing a lot of the farm working or just being out in the dining in local areas. And so that is a big concern in the community. And I think the fact that a lot of them are not able to receive unemployment benefits or are receiving a stimulus check really puts them at a higher risk, but they're not able to take a lot of those days off. So I just kind of want to bring some awareness to this issue, and it was brought on by multiple people at this call.
Thank you, Jules.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Jules. Okay, any other questions for Al and Stacey? Okay, good luck, to your employers. What I would love to do now, before we move on to other folks, is I wanted to ask Abisha if she could provide us with an update on the PPE exchange. It's just 2 P's.
2 P's and an E, yeah. Thank you, Commissioner. I get them confused oftentimes in emails, so I hope people can read through my mistakes when I send out information. It looks like Commissioner Cooley in the chat posted the link to the SEDCOR PPE directory. We do now have that live. It's up and running. It is still being built. So even though I say it's live, it's up and running, we are still building in the information. So as you kind of click around in there, you'll see that there are icons to click on. So if you're looking for mask suppliers, you can click on the mask icon and you can see who locally is providing that what types of masks. The information that we're still looking to build in are things like minimum order requirements. We realize we have a few duplications in there and we have some missing information. So we're working with our local chamber and other ECDEV partners to make sure that we build that out even more throughout the rest of this week so that we have a fully functioning directory that includes, to the best of our knowledge, all of our local manufacturers and the materials they're providing. So one of the other things I've been talking to the chamber folks about, and Dave Reklos, I'm glad to see that you're on the call as well, is how we might approach supporting our smaller businesses in putting together some sort of collective buying effort. So we realize, just as Jules was mentioning, that some of the smaller businesses especially are having a hard time identifying where to go to find the PPE. We hope that they could use our directory to identify who the suppliers are and what their minimums are, and then potentially work with each other through the chamber, through the downtown association, whatever mechanism makes sense and where folks are prepared to provide that sort of support, to collectively put together orders for multiple businesses so that they can reach those minimums. That's what we hope to see happen. SEDCOR is happy to assist in doing that work, but we certainly know that the chambers of commerce, the downtown associations, and the folks that are kind of on the front lines with those retail businesses are the best positioned to know who needs what. So as you click around in that system, if you have any questions, let me know. We definitely struggled to get it built into our website. We have an older, more antiquated system than we even thought we did as we started building this. But ultimately, I think our IT folks did a great job at putting together something that's easy to use, very accessible. And we would like to expand this resource to additional businesses. So anyone who's on the call, even if it's just outside of our region, but still very local, we want to make sure that folks are just getting access to what they need.
Great, thank you, Abisha. Does anybody have questions for Abisha about the PPP exchange? Okay, great. And I wanted to, yes, thank you very much, Abisha. I wanted to put a note out there that, and this is something that Representative Gomberg has spoken about a lot, is the unemployment claims process. And I had a particular individual who came to me with 7 weeks of waiting time, getting the notification every week. And I finally just sent Jody Christensen an email, and I was like, hey, what can we do? This is, not getting funds means, as Mayor Witowski spoke about a couple of weeks ago, means that we as a community and as a government, state, local, haven't fulfilled our promises to people as part of this public health response. And Jody said, we have I think she called it the strike team. So they're checking on individual cases and they're putting them right into the employment department. So if there are people who you're like, wow, this person really, 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 really needs to make contact with the employment department, apparently they're working on that. So let me know and I can get people connected. And I really, and Representative Gomberg can probably really attest to this, it shouldn't be a matter of one individual who has a connection to somebody who can get, up in the line. It should be that we as a community get everybody through the process, especially since we don't know how long it's going to be. So I just wanted to put that out there before we get too much further on. And now I'd love to go to Mayor Cooley. Mayor Cooley, what would you like to tell people in the community today?
You know, there was quite a bit of a flurry of activity yesterday when the Baker County decision came down, and of course, I think most of us realized that was probably not going to stand very long, and it didn't. So, well, that actually came in during our council meeting, and it popped up in my computer as I was sitting there watching the council meeting. So I just like to encourage people to continue what we're doing. It's working. We have people that are not getting sick, and we want to make sure and keep it that way. So thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Mayor. Mayor Cape, what would you like to tell people in the community today? Besides about the Amity Business Relief Program, right? Or is that what it's called? I forget.
I'm not sure. That's a Facebook page. Yes, that's a great thing that got started by some community members to try and help our businesses. So I just had another meeting start, so I'm going to have to make this quick. But I do have lots going on. I wanted to point out patriotic beaver shirt for election day. So there's that. I did go out on Saturday into town, and I was quite dismayed and shocked. I just went to our little market here in town. Probably saw in total while I was driving around and in the store, probably 35 people. I was the only one wearing a face covering. And it seems like the 6-foot idea of social distancing gets smaller and smaller every time you go out. 6 foot turns into 5 foot, which turns into 4 foot as people relax that awareness. And so that is a concern of mine. On Sunday, I went into McMinnville. I saw a lot of things, again, just the concerns of the social distancing, like what Shannon shared earlier. I think is a huge concern. So I see that as something that we need more strength in how we move forward. And after the judge's ruling yesterday, who knows how that strength and that message comes. But I did also want to share, I had a chance to go through the Oregon Health document that Jody Christensen sent out on mask and face covering guidance for business, transit, and to the public. And mostly this is for, I hope, the senator and representatives as they pay attention. And this is kind of what I get at when I say there's ambiguity in guidance. On the very top line of the second page, and I'm interested in transit, working with school buses. So it says transit agencies must require face coverings and have to provide one for a rider that doesn't have one. So you have to, if a rider gets on the bus, you have to provide them with the face covering if they don't have it. Then halfway down that same page, it says, well, consider whether to provide face coverings to customers or visitors who do not have one. And so that's where it's so ambiguous. You get one line that says, yes, you got to do this. And then on the exact same page, it says, well, it's a good idea. And so that is just a frustration that I continue to have, and probably why I keep bringing up in here, why I think we need to have stronger language about face coverings, because businesses see that and they don't know what to do. I think most businesses and their owners would like to require face coverings, if nothing else, for the protection of their own employees. But they don't see that clear, yes, you got to have it. And I understand where the state's coming from and why they have been reluctant to be stronger in that wording. But that reluctance leads to situations like I saw here in Amity on Saturday, where now it seems like nobody is wearing a face covering. And so that is a concern of mine, and why I probably do just keep bringing that up. In Casey, you had in an email asked about the Baker County judge's ruling, and I sent out a message with the help of our city staff yesterday on our city Facebook page, and I thought I did a pretty good job, just saying, hey, my whole message was, let's just stay calm, right? Yesterday, we woke up with one set of rules. By the middle of the day, it got flipped around 180 degrees. And then by the end of the day, late at night, when I went to bed, it flipped around again. And I expect in a couple of days, when they get a chance to go to the state Supreme Court and have that hearing, there's gonna be some changes again. And then, likely after that, there might be another appeal and more changes. And I certainly expect a special session. I know that the legislators online have to be a little, well, we don't know, I think it's pretty certain that there will be a legislative session. And I certainly think it's realistic to expect some legislation coming out in there addressing these issues one way or another. And so again, I see at some point in the next couple of months, this is going to be an ongoing thing where we're going to have a lot of change. And so my message was, yes, things are going to change. What hasn't changed, though, is that CDC, Oregon Health, and Yamhill County Health instructions of how to stay safe, which is face coverings, washing hands, social distancing, being smart and doing all those things. So I think that is some of the real keys that we need to focus on as we move forward, and that really was kind of what my message last night was in that got sent out. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. Real quick, with regards to the heroes, I read through some of that. I was very excited to see, yes, $1.5 billion for water and wastewater utility funding in there. I'm not quite sure that $1.5 billion is enough for the entire country, but at least it's a start. I realize it's really a no-go right now in the Senate, so who knows where we go from there, but I'm really happy that it's at least in the discussions right now. So, sorry I had to talk really fast. I do need to leave because I got to move on, but thank you very much, and we'll talk later.
Thank you very much, Mayor. And along those lines, I feel like the mask, the face covering issue is a people's just perceptions of it and their attitudes towards face coverings for themselves is changing at every moment, both from the business perspective, the employee perspective, and people out in the world. And I think we're just going to have to, as leaders, kind of roll with that for some people, they're just not going to go there until they're like, oh, yeah, okay, I'll wear it because it's just a normal part of being in society now. But I'll tell you that a couple of days ago, I just got slammed on Facebook over the very idea of people wearing masks in public. So I think that we're just going to have to all work through it and provide a consistent message to our community. All right, thank you very much, Mayor. I wanted to go now to Jules from Unidos and the City of Newburgh. What would you like to tell people here and in the community today?
Yes, so one thing that we're working right now with Unidos is that we're hoping to provide some face masks for community members. And what we realize is that a lot of the Latinx community members don't have access to these face masks, or they haven't been able to get a hold of some. So what we're hoping is that we've applied for some funding and received. So we're hoping to make some face masks and then send out little Ziploc bags to different people with information regarding, COVID and any other resources that might be helpful for the community. So those will be going out to, and we're hoping to send maybe per family to get them connected. And then the other thing that Unidos has really been working on has been for the Oregon Workers Relief Fund. We have met with Representative Noble. We met with you, Casey Cool, about 2 weeks ago. We also met with Mayor Rick Rogers from Newburgh. And then, so the Oregon Workers Relief Fund is helping families who do not qualify for the stimulus check or unemployment benefits. So a lot of the parents who would, request or solicit their taxes through an ITIN number, so they don't have a social security number. And so a lot of the children, like I mentioned, are citizens, but because their parents are using ITIN, they will not receive the previous economic impact check And so we're really promoting for the cities to promote the idea of the Oregon Workers Relief Fund, either as simply by endorsing it or providing some funds for it. I think a lot of the communities here in Yamhill County are striving for the idea of equity and inclusion. And this is a really good way to stand behind a fund that really is looking out for some of the more vulnerable people in our communities who may not have a voice in spaces like this. But I'm trying to do my best connecting with a lot of these community members in McMinnville and Dayton and Newburgh, which are like some of the bigger communities here. And so they really appreciate having these conversations with you, Casey, having conversations with Mayor Rogers, and are willing to meet with other representatives and local officials. So if you're interested in knowing more about the Latinx community and what they're facing, it really is a two-way street. So we are very open to having these type of conversations. Thank you, Casey.
Great, thank you very much, Jules and Councillor. And I understand that you had a long city council meeting last night, but you survived it and you're awake now, so you must have made it. Good.
4 hours.
Woo. All right, well, thank you very much for joining us again. Before we sign off, is there anything else that people would like to say? Abisha.
Thank you, Commissioner. There's one last thing I wanted to share. So I've been telling folks on these calls that SEDCOR has been working at a regional level to try to secure some funds for the coronavirus recovery process with our business community. We have successfully secured, in partnership with the Council of Governments and Willamette Workforce Partnership, $50,000 through OCF as funds that we can leverage for. It's a small amount of money, and also it can be a very impactful amount of money. So we look to use these funds to leverage additional funds that we can bring into our 3-county region. And so when you realize this is a 3-county region, we're securing funds for $50,000 doesn't go very far. But if we can use it to leverage the commitment of other partners to bring additional funds, then it can be quite useful. And we're doing that. So yesterday we submitted a regional proposal to the state of Oregon for the Business Oregon Relief Program, the first $2.5 million that they're committing to business relief. We went in with Marion, Polk, and Yamhill County asking for an ask. It is we put together a distribution model that was similar to the approach we took for the Yamhill County Grant Program that ensured that we would be reaching all corners of all 3 counties with these funds. They also have a focus on small businesses, so less than 25 employees. There is a focus on reaching historically disadvantaged populations. So we identified how we would be marketing and trying to approach the Hispanic community, the women-owned business community, and also the Russian community, given our population in this region. And they also have a desire to reach sole proprietors. So we put within that allocation model the approach to reaching sole proprietors. So we will hopefully know within a few days, based on the timeline that they've set for themselves, whether or not we're awarded those funds. But I also, shared with the team that put this proposal together that regardless of whether or not we secure this funding, it's really exciting to have a 3-county proposal that's complete, that takes into consideration the need that currently still exists in their 3 counties. We did a lot of census data gathering in order to put this together, and we put together a regional distribution model. And this could be used for any other approach, any other potential proposal in the future. So having that work done is pretty exciting. And hopefully we get some funds.
Great, thank you very much, Abisha. Any follow-ups to that from folks who are still here with us? All right, Representative Gomberg, do you have any last thoughts? I'm putting him on the spot since he disappeared. What can I say? All right, well, thank you all. And I want to remind the community that everybody who's arrayed here is here because they can help us, and they're dedicated to working on both the public health and the economic response and recovery to the coronavirus. So we're here working for you, and reach out to any of us if you have questions. And as Mayor Cape said, 6-foot distance, keep your hands washed, and please wear a face covering in public. It's for you and for everybody else. So thank you very much, and we will see you on Friday.